As a part of the massive open online course on constitutional government and democracy in India, today we will look into the workings of the 5th and 6th schedules of the Constitution of India. Schedules, to start with, are actually additions to the Constitution. They usually contain details which articles in the Constitution text cannot accommodate. So, there are a number of schedules, of which our interest today is on the 5th and the 6th schedules. These two schedules are important from two points of view. One, they deal with the tribal question in India, the role and responsibility of the government of India and also the state governments, and also it has an indirect link to the issue of federal polity. It often raises the question whether the presence and the workings of the 5th and the 6th schedules are inimical to the principle and philosophy of federalism as has been tried to be upheld by the Constitution of India. Let us see what it tells us. The 5th and 6th schedules actually follow from Article 244 clauses 1 and 2 of the Part 10 of the Constitution of India. They are in fact details which are not given in Article 244 clauses 1 and 2. These two clauses of Article 244 deal with the tribal majority areas in some states of India and try to ascertain and try to give the details regarding what both the union government and as well as the state government under the direction and control of the union government are supposed to do with regard basically to the question of tribal welfare and also the question of self-governance of these tribal communities. Now, who are tribes? Tribals are basically a group of people who are united by their shared anthropological and cultural characteristics, and usually they stay together and also they stay away from the mainstream national life. We can find them primarily in areas which are often geographically inaccessible and in some parts of India, mostly in northeastern part and also in the central and western part. In fact, tribes which constitute 8.6% of India's population as per the 2011 census are mostly concentrated in the central plains, and they have or they accommodate at least half of the Indian tribal population. If you look at the history a bit, we will find that when the colonial rulers came to India, they found India to be having a large tribal population and basically concentrated as where they are now. Now, they encountered two realities. One was that these tribal people, socially and economically backward as they were often exploited by non-tribal economic predators for their own economic benefits. And they are also sometimes, due to the long years of exploitation faced by them, they are also sometimes very protesting, and as a result of which from the middle of the 19th century towards the end of the 19th century, we find or the colonial rulers found a series of uprisings of different tribal groups, the major ones being the Veer uprising, the Kol uprising, the Santhal rebellion and the Munda uprising. Now, tribals are by practice and by their long tradition are a fighting community. So, they knew how to fight, although they had weapons which did not definitely match the modern weapons of the colonial powers. Britishers took a two-pronged strategy to deal with these issues. On the one hand, they thought it was essentially necessary to give a recognition to the needs of life and livelihood of these tribal communities who usually lived on natural products and natural surroundings. So, as a result of which we found two Forest Rights Acts which sought to guarantee and more specifically the important one of them was the Indian Forest Act of 1927, which sought to guarantee to the tribals their continued access to the local environment, the forest, its products and all that. Secondly, due to the rebellious nature or rebellious tradition of these tribal groups, the Britishers thought it was prudent to keep them in isolation, and as a result of which, as it is the tribal groups by themselves maintain some isolation from the national mainstream, the Britishers tried to give a final shape to it with a policy of declaring certain tribal majority areas in certain provinces of British India as excluded areas wholly or excluded areas partially. Interestingly, post independence, when the 5th and the 6th schedules are drawn up, we will see later that they tried to carry on the legacy of these excluded areas. And these excluded areas, which were inhabited mainly by tribal population, were specifically placed under the control of the Governor General of India, who acted through the governor of the province, which means these areas were actually beyond the ambit of the provincial governments. And this was exemplified particularly in Government of India Act of 1919, Article 15, and the Government of India Act of 1935, Articles 91 and 92. Before we go into a detailed discussion of the Article 244, clauses 1 and 2 and the following 5th and 6th schedules, let us see how tribe is identified by the Constitution of India, and that is very important. Allow me to read a portion from the Indian Constitution. Article 366, clause 25 define scheduled tribes as such tribes or tribal communities or parts or groups within such tribes or tribal communities as are deemed under Article 342 to be scheduled tribes for the purpose of this Constitution. So, we are referred back to Article 342, and Article 342 gives us the procedure by which a tribe may be designated as a scheduled tribe. Just for information, not all tribes found within the territory of India are lucky or not so to be on the schedule or to be a scheduled tribe. The primary role in this regard is given to the President of India, who after consultation with the Council of Ministers and also the respective state governments, since the tribes are spread in a number of states, declares by an order certain tribes to be on the schedule, which means certain tribes to be scheduled tribes. Since 1950 and up till date, 8 such orders have identified a number of tribes to be scheduled tribes spread in different states, which we have just or previously noted that most of them are physically concentrated in the central Indian plains. After looking into the constitutional idea of who can be a scheduled tribe, let us see what Article 244 tells us. Article 244 is the foundational article of Part 10 of the Constitution of India, and the Part 10 is titled as the Scheduled and Tribal Areas, and Article 244 is titled as the Administration of Scheduled Areas and Tribal Areas. So, a difference is maintained here between scheduled areas and tribal areas. The provisions of the 5th schedule apply to the scheduled areas and administration of control of scheduled areas of such states apart from 4 northeastern states, Assam, Tripura, Meghalaya and Mizoram. So, it means 5th schedule deals with all non-northeastern states, while the 6th schedule applies to the 4 northeastern states we have just mentioned, that is Assam, Tripura, Meghalaya and Mizoram, or more specifically the tribal areas within those states. The fifth schedule. In the fifth schedule, there are certain features of the fifth schedule as they are applicable to the non-northwestern states and tribal areas within them. One is declaration of scheduled areas. The President of India has to, through an order, declare certain areas within certain states to be scheduled areas depending on the presence of tribal people and tribal communities. A question could arise that how can actually, though no specific characteristic features are mentioned in the Constitution, about the question who can be a tribe. First of all, one has to be a tribe and then it can become a scheduled tribe or not. However, who has to be a tribe, no specific guideline has been mentioned in the Constitution text. We can get that idea only through some guidelines as mentioned in the 1931 census and through the reports of various post-independence committees and commissions formed for the purposes of different issues relating to the tribals. In this, the stress is mainly on 1. The backwardness of the community, 2. Their distinctive cultural characteristics, 3. Their isolation or an attitude of isolation from mainstream national life. Actually, tribes do not fit into any particular religious category too. So, with this rough kind of idea, we identify tribes and then they qualify to be on the scheduled tribe list. Now, Article 244, which clause 1, which has led to the fifth schedule. In the fifth schedule, the first task is to declare an area to be a scheduled area, which means an area inhabited by a majority of tribals. So, first the President identifies by notification. The President may also extend the area, may also shorten the area, may change the area, may change the name, but is essentially a responsibility of the President. Once the President has done it, then it is the responsibility of the governor of that particular state to look after the activities within that scheduled area, and the governor has to send to the President an annual report in this regard. The governor, as part of his responsibility, has to form in such states a tribal advisory council, which will be the nodal body for looking after the needs and necessities of the people of those scheduled areas. And this tribal advisory council is formed of 20 members, 3/4 of whom are elected or selected by the tribes themselves and the rest nominated by the governor. And laws which usually apply to the whole of the state may or may not apply within those scheduled areas. They will not have to apply, and it all depends on the discretion of the governor in his capacity as the guardian of those scheduled areas. The Constitution also requires the President to appoint a commission nationwide to report on the activities and the problems of these scheduled areas, and till date we have found 2 or 3 such commissions. In fact, we have found out, unfortunately, that the Union Government of India is not so keen on forming these commissions, or once they are formed, not so keen on monitoring their activities. So, these commissions exist only on paper. That is about the fifth schedule, which looks after the tribal majority areas in 4 non-northeastern states. If we come down to sixth schedule essentially talks about tribal areas, and there are some differences between the provisions of the fifth and the sixth schedule. The Constitution under the sixth schedule contains special provisions for the administration and control of tribal areas in 4 northeastern states of Assam, Tripura, Meghalaya and Mizoram. The features of the sixth schedule. The first important feature of the sixth schedule is that it gives responsibility to the governor of a state under sixth schedule to constitute the tribal areas in that state into an autonomous district, which means in the states of Assam, Tripura, Meghalaya and Mizoram, there can be and there are such autonomous districts. If there are more than one tribe within that area of the district, there should be within the autonomous district autonomous councils for each tribe. Each autonomous district has a council to look after its activities composed of 20 members, of which 4 are nominated by the governor himself or herself and the rest are elected by the tribals themselves. And the same holds true of the autonomous regions within the autonomous districts. In fact, neither the laws made by the national parliament nor the laws made by the state assemblies can directly apply within those autonomous district or autonomous region areas. In that sense, it is some kind of a state within a state. And these areas or these autonomous district areas or autonomous region areas and their councils perform a very important function with regard to the maintenance and looking after of the needs and necessities of the tribal people themselves. Though they are under the governor of a particular state, though they theoretically are under the executive part of the state, they usually take all the necessary decisions for their lives themselves. In a way, they are kind of self-governing associations at the local level. That concludes a discussion of the basic features of the 5th and 6th schedules, which is of course a summary because the features run into several pages and not all of which may essentially be important here for our discussion. Before we go on to later happenings, we can look into another aspect too, which has raised the question of federalism. Now, India we know is a federal polity, though in no part of the constitution you can find a clear declaration to that extent that India is a federal polity, but by all intents and purposes India is a federal polity. Now, in a federal polity, the states are supposed to enjoy some kind of autonomy in their own areas, and that is why there is a detailed division of power in the 7th schedule. Interestingly, the 7th schedule chronologically comes after 5th and 6th. So, before we divide the powers between the union government and the state government, demarcate the areas of responsibility of the national government and the state governments, we have clarified the stand regarding the tribal areas, which means if we go by the numerals or if we go by the numbers 5th, 6th and 7th, then definitely the more important are 5th and 6th than the 7th as they precede the 7th one. Now, we can come to two recent changes which have some bearing on our discussion today. One is that you all know that by the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1992, Panchayat was made an all India practice and the Panchayati Raj system was instituted all over India except the 5th schedule areas. In 1996, the Panchayati Raj system was extended to these scheduled areas through the provisions of the Panchayat's Extension to Scheduled Areas Act 1996 or PISA Act of 1996, and this Panchayati Raj system tried to strengthen the already found traditional self-governance in these tribal communities by giving it a structure. So, Gram Sabhas constituted under this PISA Act of 1996 tried to institutionalize the traditional systems of self-governance as found in different tribal communities. And these Gram Sabhas have been given enormous responsibilities to look after the needs of the property, inheritance, the local forest produce and all the control over the local forest produce and all these issues which affect the daily lives of the tribals themselves. So, this PISA can be explained or can be looked upon from two angles. One, is it strengthening the scheduled areas? Is it further augmenting the fifth schedule, or is it cutting into the powers given to the scheduled areas by the fifth schedule? Arguments are there from both sides, and actually the truth lies somewhere in between. Regarding the sixth schedule, we know that in year 2003, as a result of an agreement, the Bodoland Territorial Area District was transferred into the Bodoland Territorial Council in Assam, which comprised 4 contiguous districts of Kokrajhar, Baksa, Udalguri and Chirang, with an area of some more than 8,000 square kilometer. Thus, a Bodoland Territorial District Council was transferred to the Bodoland Territorial Council, and which is almost totally self-governing. So, these two, regarding fifth schedule, the extension of the panchayat system to fifth schedule areas, and the formation in 2003 of the Bodoland Territorial Council have raised important questions, because in 2003, as we know about the state of West Bengal, prior to in the 1980s, the demand for the Gorkhaland state, and this demand was sought to be given a compromise formula in the sense of the formation of the Darjeeling Gorkha Hill Council in the times of the left front regime. But once this Bodoland Territorial Council came up in 2003, after long years of partly militant struggles and partly peaceful struggles, the government of India agreed to such a territorial council. Once again, the hill people of the Darjeeling district raised the question of having a similar territorial council for Darjeeling hill people. So, the formation and the activities of the Bodoland Territorial Council and the agreement signed to this extent by the Government of India, Government of Assam and the Bodoland Tribal Force opens the door for perhaps many such demands in future for such territorial councils. And regarding the PISA, it can once again be called that whether to extend the PISA to not only to fifth schedule areas, but to sixth schedule areas as well. So, in a way, just as we should discuss fifth and sixth schedule separately, we should also discuss fifth and sixth schedule together with all other acts, all of the orders of the Government of India, which have tried so far till independence to ensure both the improvement of the social and economic conditions of the tribal people, and as well as to keep alive their systems of traditional local self-governance by not interfering into their activities either on the level of the state governments or on the level of the national government.